Lane, Jacoby Trotman, comes from front office. Brianna Lane, Jacoby Trotman. Ryland Boatright comes to the front office. Dalton Taylor comes to the front office.
Hey, go ahead and get Chromebook. And I'll explain everything. How was spring break, Nancy?
Not very good.
9 days off at a minimum, right?
Well, I was at the hospital like when my dad got sick on the top of the hospital. So I just can you bring
Good.
You are just following orders. Hey, yeah, you
Go ahead and get Chromebook. Go ahead and get Chromebook.
If somebody tells you that,
I'm already talking.
I'm sorry, Thompson, we kind of argued.
You argued about what? I'm shocking. No, we already kind of want to leave. Oh, well, I'll put
Because
that.
look at this.
Yeah.
Look at yourself right now.
Well, first things first, I want to hear all about your trip. And second things second, we'll start talking about nuclear bombs.
Trip? Why so many words? Why didn't you put some of them there for us?
We got some paddling to do.
Oh,
Hey, paddling is hard. Go ahead and get Chromebooks. Get ready to paddle hard. That's all I got for you. Paddle, not hard. Hard.
great. So excited. Swanson, this is too much.
Well, first of all, I want you to queue up your best 2 Bahamas stories, followed by your best Justin Bieber story.
This Justin Bieber story.
No. Queue it up. I want to hear about it.
Wait, what?
Get it ready.
Oh, for everyone here?
Yeah, that's right.
But what about everybody else's stories?
Yeah,
They have to share theirs too. Hey, Swanson, I have an idea. Everybody can share one thing they did on spring break.
Pretty much where I'm going. You got, go ahead and drop it in the box. Yeah, good job.
When we start class, Derek. When we start class.
Come on in. Go ahead and get a Chromebook. Go ahead and get a Chromebook.
Tina Williams comes to the front office. Tina Williams.
No. You're kidding.
I'm not.
You're kidding.
Oh, yeah, I got shown that.
You are kidding me.
You did that. What the?
When did that?
Yes. I was just trying to scroll on this.
Go ahead and get a Chromebook. You must y'all figure it out. Notes on your desk. But not before we talk about spring break. So go ahead and queue up your best stories. Because we are going to talk about spring break.
Thank y'all appreciate that.
Silly goose. Look at Savannah. Savannah's got it done. Savannah has it done.
Y'all ready?
Amen, Landon is so
We got some bonus points getting turned in. That's awesome. We got some of y'all that did the digital version as well. That's awesome. We got Josh filling out his notes already. That's awesome. All right, Chromebooks, anyone else? Play portals, come on up. All right, give yourself a second to think about this question, right? Welcome back to school. Think about this super heavy question. Can you break the law if you are, quoting fingers, just following orders?
Heck, yes, you can.
Can you break the law?
Yes.
I gotta have it.
100%.
Yes, it's fair.
I wonder if I Hey, Landon, can you go get me a pencil?
All right, hey, this question's already on your page. It's not a full-on journal sheet or anything like that. Just use that top block to answer this question. can you break the law if you are, quote, just following orders? What do you think?
Oh, this one ain't even sharpened, man.
And then the second thing that you can get to is you can actually, I'm going to do something that kind of happened by accident. That one day that I had to leave early, I gave you the Chromebooks. Y'all kind of followed along as we went. I think it actually worked out pretty well. So for this push to the finish line, in this class, I'm going to experiment with this. Don't mess it up. Don't be on Among Us or any of the other weird websites y'all go to. If you want to be on Google Classroom with the PowerPoint slides up, scrolling along with me. Try not to get ahead, right? Because then you're not paying attention. But if you want to follow along on the PowerPoints as I go, I think that will eliminate the whole, hey, go back. I didn't finish yet. So you're welcome to pull the computer up in order to be on the PowerPoint slides as I go through the PowerPoint slides. Okay? I will walk the room like usual. You're Jesus, don't let me catch you on some other website. I'm going to get angry. But if you want to be on my PowerPoint slides, you can do that. Yeah, what, am I gonna walk there for you? Steel Toe Express, buddy. Steel Toe Express. Tonight. Yeah. Like a lot of them right there. Pull the tab on the grenade. See how it goes for you. About 1 more minute on this opening question. Kind of like activating our brains.
Because it's good information. It's good information. It's mind blowing. Some may even be flabbergasted.
All right, I miss you, you miss me. Let's talk about spring break. So let's do, as we've done in this class very often, let's do peak or pit, right? I tell you at my family dinner table, a lot of times we do peak or pit for the day. What's your high point? What's your low point? If you got a low point, it's okay to talk about that too, right? Makes us healthy humans. So I want to hear your peaks and your pit from spring break. Who's got what? Jacqueline's got her arm up. Oh yeah. Okay, Ken, what you got?
We missed school.
We missed school. For starters, we missed school, right? A 9-day. Everybody feel. Anybody need a vacation from the vacation?
Yes.
I need that as well. All right. I know we got some travels. I know we got some adventures in the room. So, Sanaa, what you got? First of all, you got a lot of Reese's peanut butter cups.
Yeah.
But what else you got?
My piece, I went to the beach with some friends.
The beach.
And then,
Which one?
That's such a great question.
Not sure.
Yeah.
Did you, now here's my next question. Did you imagine to your left and to your right 50 miles of beachhead being invaded on June 6, 1944?
No.
Did you imagine that?
No.
Don't know which beach you went to. What SPF did you use?
I
know about UV rays.
I didn't. No.
None.
No.
None. Okay.
That's why I'm a tad bit dark right now.
Okay. What else?
And then I say my pit, my dog died.
Is that like for real?
Yeah, like for real.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like we should.
We came back that night. Yeah.
Oh, you okay? Are you healing? You emotionally distraught?
Hey, I haven't been outside because it was an outside dog. I haven't been outside that day.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. Anybody want to go after that? Haven, I know you've got 2 big adventures, and I told you to queue up some stories.
Other people go first.
So, okay, so other people are going to keep going first. Who else? I'm going last. I'll tell you my story. Baseball is how we do. 2 out of 3, right? Count our best. Hey, we got a path to the playoffs. We got a path to the playoffs. I know it. That's good. That's good.
I think Savannah has something.
Savannah, what's your story?
Well,
Yes, huh? She won the platinum.
Savannah, I have a question for you. Did you, as you sat down your beach chairs, imagine to your left, to your right, 50 miles of beachhead on June 6, 1944, being assaulted on the D-Day invasion? No? I haven't talked to you guys. All right, Haven, I think you're up. Haven, where did you go? And what is your peak from it? Did you sit in the golden chair at the Atlantis Hotel?
I did.
As did I 4 years ago. Way to go. Cool.
That was definitely not the peak.
What was your peak of the cruise?
Wasn't during the cruise. Definitely the coffee.
The coffee.
It was really good.
Okay.
And I could get it whenever I wanted.
Did you bring some back?
No,
Oh, you just mean on the cruise ship, not like the Caribbean blend or anything like that.
no, on the cruise ship.
Okay.
They would give me coffee whenever I wanted
Yes,
it.
they
It was
would. You
fantastic.
paid for it, but yes, they would.
Yeah.
Yes, they would. Okay, cool. What about when you tried to get in Haley Bieber's way and steal her man right off?
I didn't see her. I don't think she's a very good wife. And I could change my Instagram name too, so.
That's good. That's good. If you don't know,
She just changed her
Haven
Instagram
went
name.
and tried
Too
to,
many marriage licenses.
see try to get Justin Bieber to see her. Hey, was Emmanuel there? Did he go as well?
Yeah.
Emmanuel?
I didn't see.
I'm pretty sure.
Taylor was there.
You were there?
I couldn't believe it.
Yes, she was so close.
But COVID. So we didn't.
No.
Who cares?
Who cares?
No, I was so close to him, like for me to use.
Okay.
Like no lie. Oh.
Love of your life or just a nice guy? He's also the love of your guy. So fight. Get him real
That's
fight.
right.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, hey, I know it's third block. I know we're back. We've woken up to Monday. We're at school. We got pencils, all that. I'll tell you my peak and pin, and then we'll get moving to where we need to go. So our family trip was like to somewhere incredibly creative, a place we've never been before. We went to Disney one more time because it's what my kids love. And if you know the Tires, we traveled with them, Caden and Johnny Lynn. I bet some of you don't know Caden, he's an 8th grader. So we had a magical time at Disney World, as always, making memories for our girls. Right? Y'all go where you choose to go. We choose to go to Disney. That's our choice. So my peak was definitely being at Disney. My pit was, so now I bet you experienced this exact same thing just across the way. Getting rained on. Got rained on real hard at one point. It was like this 12-minute window, and instead of standing inside, we were walking across the park. And so therefore, that's just a full mood right there, right? Mason got inside the stroller. You can see she doesn't super fit inside the stroller. Sayla's in there as well. So that was just a whole vibe right there, a whole vibe.
How hard was your end? Because when we got rained on, it like hurt really bad. It was raining.
I don't know if I'd say the word hurt,
Yeah,
but
we couldn't see.
it was pretty hard rain. Here's our rain story. We had reservations for something on the back side of the park. We legit had just beeped in with our car, right? So we're at the park. If we got there like 15 minutes earlier, we probably would have gotten to our reservation spot and we'd have been inside. But no, when we got there, beep, rain immediately starts going. And I suppose we could have just like not gone to a reservation, but of course that wasn't going to happen. So we had to hoof it through the park in order to get there. And yeah, that's just the whole vibe right there. That pretty much summed up that minute. Now, I know some of y'all going to be like, this guy is such a nerd. But at Disney, there is this awesome production called The American Adventure. And it was an awesome 30-minute show, literally about our United States history. That Epcot is, should you ever go, I would strongly, highly recommend sitting through that 30-minute show, especially if you go in the summer. It's like a 30-minute air conditioning break. Or if you go and it's raining, it's a 30-minute time inside where it's not raining. So our The American Adventure is hosted by Benjamin Franklin, and he took us through history all the way up to the present. It was pretty cool. So anyway, that was our peak and pit and history experience along the way as well. Yeah, so today we got to end this war. You ready for it? Let's end the war. Now, okay, I see that you guys are taking me up on the offer, and I love it. I'm going to ask you to not get too far ahead of me, okay? Because that means you're just probably not listening at that point. Stay with me, right? It's on your screen. Those of you that always struggle to see the screen, it might be helpful. I'm asking you to don't get too far ahead of me, because then you're going to be just tuned out and not listening. I'm going to go as fast as I can on some thoughts here. I got a 25-minute video. I do want to show you, so that's where I intend to get. Not all talking, not all me, trying to get to a video. I hope that this is a pretty I hope that this is a review type class, right? My world historians, we've already come through a lot of this information. I'm going to expand a little deeper, going to elaborate a little bit more than we did in world history. Obviously, it's been a year, more than a year since then, so some of this might be like, oh yeah, now I remember. But I'm hoping we got a pretty strong recall on some of this stuff because we have talked about it before right in this room. So we're talking about how it ends in the European theater, how it also ends in the Pacific theater. Your notes go generally in order. There are two sections where you got to go like, European on one side and Pacific on the other side. So you don't have to flip the page too much, but it's just a little bit of a left side, right side thing right there. So here we go. The European theater. How does it actually end? And this is what you would put in your gray box. The fall of Berlin. The war in Europe ends with the fall of Berlin, Germany. That's the capital of Germany. It's where Hitler was for most of the war. It was his protected, prized city. And when Berlin is surrounded and surrenders, this is what leads to the end of the war in Europe. This is the event that leads to the end of the war in Europe. And now, of course, I'm going to tell you about the whole story, how it happened. When we think about the European theater, I want us to think about D-Day to VE Day. D-Day, where we watched Saving Private Ryan, the beachheads of Normandy, France. That's June 6th, 1944. That is when the Allies entered European territory and started to clear out all that territory that Hitler had already gained. D-Day, June 6, 1944. VE Day, bit of an acronym, stands for Victory in Europe Day, VE Day. It occurs on May 8th, 1945.
Sanaa's birthday.
Sanaa's birthday was what I was about to say.
Yep.
I will never forget that now. Neither will you. You should never forget VE Day, right? It's your birthday.
That's what we write. Birthday.
Yeah, go ahead. And I am going to have a little bit more for you to write other than just the date, but yeah, it's a good start. So we can see the war itself, the bulk of the fighting in Europe lasts about 11 months. Yes, Pearl Harbor until 1944, there's some fighting going on in Europe. But the heart of the fighting, the real push to finish the war, occurs in about 11 months. 11 months of persistent conflict. Now, to kind of illustrate it to you, what I'm going to do, I found this awesome video. I did not fake it. Found this video that shows troop movement from D-Day to VE Day, just like we discussed. And I'm gonna play it and kind of narrate it. There's not any audio to it, but I'm gonna narrate it. You guys are wise. You guys are smart enough, I think, to know what different flags look like. I think you can determine that you can tell what a Nazi flag is. You can tell what a Soviet flag is. You know what an American flag looks like. When we see airplanes, that references a bombing campaign over that area. When we see parachutes, that means that an airborne operation happened in that area. And when we see the flags move, that means that's the front line for that country. So we're going to see a lot of flag movement. You're going to see the Nazi flags basically get all balled up. And I'm going to try to describe the dates as we go. So no audio, but lean in, pay attention. And I think there's small audio, actually. Here we go. All right. So this is 1942. This is the beginning of the European campaign. The Americans, you can see, are in Great Britain. The Soviets are coming from the east, and they start to gobble up the Germans. Bombing campaign inside of France. Oh, there's some paratroopers. This is D-Day. Here we are landing at Normandy. British, Canadian, and Americans, they are now inside of France. There's also fighting in Italy. You can see there in the south. More bombing, more parachutes. We're fighting in France. Aha, we have a foothold in France. We're gobbling up that territory that Hitler once claimed. The Nazi flags are moving back towards Germany. Ooh, the Soviets make a big advance in the east. Ooh, the Americans make a big advance in the west. Pay attention to Italy. It's still fighting as well. The big Nazi flag is Berlin. That's where Hitler is located. You can see that the end is near. This is a period of fighting called the Battle of the Bulge because the lines kept bulging back and forth until finally, approaching the Battle of Berlin, which we are about to talk about. The Soviets are coming close. The Americans are coming close. The end is near for Hitler. and it's a bad day to be a Nazi. Bad day to be a Nazi. So I hope that was, thank you, I appreciate that. I didn't even practice that actually, that was on the fly. So I hope that was kind of descriptive to you. Okay, I appreciate the sportscaster reference. It was kind of what I was doing, narrating as I went. We can see that the Soviets come from one side, the east. The Americans and British and French, as much as they could offer troops, come from the west. And the stranglehold is on Berlin. Hitler, who once expanded all across Europe, now loses all that territory he once gained. And the stranglehold comes to Berlin, Germany, which is the Battle of Berlin, which is the fall of Berlin. So now write this under the fall of Berlin. Primarily, it was the Soviet army closing in on Berlin and Hitler's so-called Eagle's Nest hideout. Hitler's big palace, his castle, his bunker, his fortress had this really profound nickname called the Eagle's Nest. So if you ever hear that in history, that is what it's referring to, Hitler's hideout. Well, Hitler, bold, courageous, powerful, strong leader that he was, as soon as the end was near, he takes the easy way out and commits suicide on April 30th, 1945.
No, he did not.
Now, we've talked about possible conspiracy theories, and I wouldn't be a good historian if I didn't encourage you to read about those on your own. Some people think he went to Argentina. Some people think he went to Antarctica. Some people think he went to the moon, and I'm for sure that they are wrong. But history recognizes, history believes, except for a small portion of conspiracy theorists, that Hitler committed suicide on April 30th, 1945. Well, in committing suicide, obviously he takes himself off the playing board. He can no longer be arrested, brought to trial, executed before the world, such like that. In committing suicide, he leaves in charge his next in line. He actually names his successor. So congrats to you, guy, and it's not even a famous name we're going to worry about. Congrats to you. You're now in charge of Nazi Germany. Good luck, because the Soviets have just taken control of Berlin, Germany. Right? Not even a long siege. We talk about a siege where they surround the city, try to choke them out, food, water, and ammunition. It wasn't even that. It was more like just a surrounding of Berlin. Great map here. You see that the yellow arrows represent the Soviet forces coming from all directions. The American forces were just a touch behind. It wasn't like we weren't as competent. We were just farther away. Geographically, the American forces were farther away. It was kind of a race to Berlin. Even though we were on the same team, okay, the Soviets and the Americans were allies, there's still this tense standoff between ideology, communists versus capitalists. So even though we were collaborating, even though we were on the same fighting side, both wanted to get there first, which is why I believe the Soviets came around from that west side. Instead of waiting for the Americans to finish the squeeze, the Soviets said, we got this, we'll get there first. And so the fall of Berlin is largely attributed to the Soviet forces. However, you can see the American push was definitely an important part of strangling the Germans along the way as well. Here we have headline, Hitler is dead. This would be from May 1st, 1945, because he died on April 30th, 1945. You can see that the troops in the field are reading this newspaper. I've already mentioned that there's the possible conspiracy theories. Some people think he escaped. The FBI actually published this list of photographs, and we had this conversation at length last year in world history. Basically, the FBI is saying, hey, this is what he might look like if he changed his appearance, grew a beard, shaved his head, put on glasses. No one ever turned up Adolf Hitler. No one ever said, here he is, to the world. So it is largely believed he did commit suicide and his body was burned on April 30th in Berlin, Germany. Here's a really powerful picture. What flag is that? The Soviet flag waving high atop Hitler's Eagle's Nest in Berlin, Germany. So this is a picture that was broadcast to the world saying that Berlin is now in Allied hands. Now, I know we might think that's the Russian flag. They're not our friends. At the time, they were. So in a weird way, that's not a bad flag. That's a good flag flying over Berlin, Germany. Now, the Soviets and the Americans, they actually do unite on April 25th. okay, a little bit south of Berlin. And this is a pretty powerful picture of an American on the left, American lieutenant, and a Soviet lieutenant, okay, they're both officers, shaking hands, embracing. And you know what? This lasted for about 3.5 minutes. Now, I'm being a little sarcastic, but this friendship did not last for very long. We were glad to collaborate against a common enemy, Hitler, right? Sometimes it's really uniting to come together against a common enemy, even if we don't agree on other things. We were friends for the time being, but it did not last for very long. A little bit more here. So VE Day, write this in the box, VE Day, May 8th, 1945. VE stands for Victory in Europe, and all across the world is referenced as VE Day. You can see the newspaper that's being held. The war is over in Europe. There's victory in Europe. It's about 9 days after Hitler actually committed suicide. The leadership he left in place basically immediately surrenders to the Allied forces. Surrender documents are, negotiated and signed and all that kind of stuff. And VE Day, May 8th, 1945, is when Germany surrenders and the war in the European theater is over. So we have the war complete in Europe. A couple pictures here to demonstrate that. Here are the Americans standing atop Hitler's eagle's nest. Again, the Soviets and Americans collaborated for a short period of time. I think it's a really poignant picture. You've got the Nazi swastika. You've got the eagle that represents the Third Reich, Hitler's Third Reich. But you got American GIs and their flag waving atop it. A lot of powerful pictures come from the war. I think about Iwo Jima, where they're hoisting the flag atop the mountain on the island of Iwo Jima. So a pretty powerful picture there. Picture here says it's VE Day. Last German units yield, which would mean surrender. Zoom in on this a little bit. What's the subheadline? What's the subline? Remember Pearl Harbor, because what is still out there? They're still fighting in the Pacific. Still fighting in the Pacific. So the rally cry of Remember Pearl Harbor is still relevant. The common belief at the time was that all the forces in Europe would now be redirected to finish the fight in the Pacific. So war's over, boys, but that doesn't mean we're going home. Might mean we're going to the Pacific. Now, in the end, that's not what happened. That could have happened if we needed to continue lengthy fighting in the Pacific. I love this newspaper headline, Germany quits. Rashid, you quitter? Heck no, right? From an athlete's perspective, no one wants to be a quitter. I think that's a pretty powerful word. Germany quits. They quit the war. Of course, we know that means surrendered, whatever. And just a variety of other headlines. The war in Europe has ended. Germany capitulates. VE Day, it's all over. The world rejoice. For most of Europe, it had been a 6-year-long war. Now, the American involvement was just at 4 years, but for most of Europe, it had been a 6-year-long war. Tired, beaten, destroyed. Much of Europe was destroyed. Everyone was grateful that the war was over. So the fall of Berlin, repercussions, consequences. Remember, like I said, we were friends with the Soviets for about 3.5 minutes. Well, now that the war is over, we've got to figure out how to administer Germany in a post-war era. The post-war administration of Germany and Berlin, right? Germany is the country and Berlin the capital, kind of dealing with the two both from a separate perspective. And I'm going to show you a picture in just a second that kind of illustrates that. Sets the stage for conflict between Western democracies and then the Soviet Union and its belief in communism. Friends for the time being, and we beat the really bad guys, which is the Germans, the Nazis. But now we got to figure out who's really going to run the world into the future. Democracy and capitalism, or totalitarianism and communism, right? We're not going to be friends for much longer. Well, this is what happens. You see the sign there, you are entering the Russian zone. Germany as a whole, and then also Berlin itself, the city itself, was divided into 4 sections. So Germany as a whole, and then even Berlin itself. Berlin is inside of the Soviet zone, but half of Berlin was free. And this is where you get what's known as the Berlin Wall, dividing Berlin east from west. The east side is administered by the Soviets and is under communist leadership. The west side is administered split into US, UK, and French zones. and it is run by freedom, democracy, and capitalism. So you literally have the city divided, and then also the country divided. Yellow is the Soviet zone, and then these three, you can see the key there, these three are the Western democracies. So I'm just blown away by, I can kind of get split the whole country, but the city that is split up inside of the communist zone, that's probably pretty confusing, right? Grandma lives in the free side of Berlin, but we live in the Soviet zone and we're not allowed to go see each other. That was a reality for a lot of families. And it was the Berlin Wall that became that divide. Here's a bit of a blow up of this picture. And I know you got it in front of you as well. So just a bit of a blow up of this picture. And I like this one, just one more kind of showing you the colors. Again, this is the British zone, French zone, US zone, Russian zone. Berlin being right inside of the Russian zone is split one more time with that famous evil representation of the Iron Curtain, the Berlin Wall itself being right down the middle. So that was a pretty rapid end to the war in Europe. What are your questions on the war in Europe and how it ended in Europe? All right. Okay. So last year, we had a pretty lengthy conversation about Hitler. Gave you his personality. We went over the 5 W's. We kind of arrived at the point of talking about the fall of Berlin, but now from a U.S. history perspective, we've got to know that that was the real finish point. Okay, the fall of Berlin and the post-war administration complications. That is why it's significant to U.S. history. So now, what was your question?
I said last year we did things. We wrote a paper about Hitler and
Yes.
paintbrush. What would happen?
Or what was your other option that you carried?
Oh, we could kill
A gun. Yeah. So I've made you a time traveler several times in this class, right? I think maybe if someone could just invent a time machine, maybe we could actually do all these things that we talked about. All right, that is the end of the war in Europe. We are moving on to, and it's not a separate class, right? It's just a separate half of the class. We're moving on to the end of the war in the Pacific, and that is going to be the atomic bombs being dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Again, this should be a bit of a review class. I am going to approach it slightly differently, but at the same time, you might see some pictures you've already seen, or at least you should remember the conversation that we're having because we pretty much talked about it last year as well. So here's your big up front. In the Pacific Theater, what ended the war? Hiroshima and Nagasaki, or you could add the words atomic bombs. The atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is what brings an end to the war in the Pacific. Now, last year, you may remember that we had a time traveler visit our class. President Harry S. Truman himself came and announced the bombing of Hiroshima as if it was August 7th, 1945. And he said, hey, we have unleashed the power 1,000 times greater than the sun. This is the greatest compromise between science and military and history, or whatever, right? Excuse me. It wasn't Harry, excuse me. I'm not giving you that speech today. Maybe you remember that this happened. Here's real Harry S. Truman, and he a very iconic statement from the president. I want you to think about the role of new technology in communicating with the world. We go from Abraham Lincoln, who at best can send out a tap, 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 a telegraph to his generals in the field or to newspapers or whatever, or at best he can meet with just a few people at a time and give a speech. So communication was harder for Abraham Lincoln. Well, let's take ourselves to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and how does he start communicating with the country? Radio. What are his radio conversations called? Do you remember? I hear it. Come on.
Fireplace or whatever.
Fireside chats. So it's almost like our friend, the president, is coming into our home on a nightly basis, and we just gather around the radio to hear him speak to us. Well, now with the advent of television, and let me just take it a step forward, we're eventually going to talk about how social media and the internet has affected politics and U.S. history. But we're at the stage of television being the way that the president can communicate with the country. Not super edited. He doesn't have a whole lot of lights on him. He probably doesn't have any stage makeup on because it's in black and white, right? Audio isn't great. We did watch this clip last year. The audio isn't great. And he's basically just reading off of a sheet of paper. Does not have a teleprompter. many occasions he has to look down, which is kind of like breaking the eye contact with his audience. So this is how President Truman spoke to the world, sharing of the news of the atomic bombs being dropped. Well, this was the message of the first one on Hiroshima. He does basically promise that there will be more if necessary. And in fact, we do find that if it becomes necessary, we drop a second one. So hopefully that's a reminder. Now we're talking about the Manhattan Project, which is on your notes, okay? This is a little bit more words than you probably need to put on your page. This is where I encourage you to summarize in your own words, okay? The Manhattan Project. Basically, it was a project that started even before the war kicked off. Starts in 1939. That is 2 years before the United States gets involved. You want to know why it started? Started because Albert Einstein. Ever heard of him?
No.
Albert Einstein sends a letter to President Roosevelt imploring him, fancy word for begging him, to start researching the capabilities of atomic fission and atomic power for use in the military, right? So Albert Einstein, kind of a pretty significant man in history, he sends a letter to President Roosevelt, and President Roosevelt says, hey, I agree. I want American scientists to start studying atomic power. So this project, or this working group, it becomes called a project, and it gets nicknamed the Manhattan Project. It's not in Manhattan, New York. And I tell you that only because I, at your age, thought that this was something that happened in New York City. Manhattan does not imply New York City. Actually, I think the reason they picked that word was to throw people off. If you were talking about the Manhattan Project, well, you probably thought people were talking about New York City. Not the case. It actually happens in the desert in New Mexico. Long story short, something we've already talked about is that a team of scientists work together to create what we know as nuclear power and nuclear weapons. The secret project for the construction of the atomic bomb. And then, it's certainly worth saying, not everyone was on board with the project. Not even the people working on the project were 100% in favor of it. Scientists, a lot of times, here's a really big, heavy trade-off. We want to advance our understanding of science, but that doesn't necessarily mean I agree with how it's going to be used. A lot of time, across time and history, inventors have seen their inventions used for bad, not good, or used in a way that they did not intend for their inventions to be used. Machine gun, for example, was used in a way that the inventor did not foresee it happening, Mr. Gatling. Dynamite, invented by Alfred Nobel, of the Nobel Peace Prize. Dynamite, Nobel Peace Prize. He actually invented dynamite with the intention, the belief that, hey, if we have this explosive material, we'll stop going to war with each other because we'll just blow each other to smithereens. As it turns out, we just started blowing each other to smithereens. So that's dynamite. And then now here we are at the nuclear age. A lot of scientists believe if we develop a nuclear bomb, surely we will never have to use it. If we can show its capabilities and show our enemies what we can do to their cities, surely they will just cease the war, they'll surrender, and we'll never have to use one of these nuclear bombs. Of course, we know that's not the case. We know that we used 2 of them, and hundreds of thousands of people died because of it. So to say that the use of the bomb was controversial, well, that is a slight understatement, to say the least. Here's a couple pictures along the way. This is a picture of a bomb that was actually not even used in testing, much less on a city. This is called Jumbo, and you can probably see why. It is a very large bomb. The bomb was constructed, but then it was disassembled. It was part of the experimenting process. So Jumbo was never actually used anywhere on the Earth. What I do like about the picture is the scientists standing right there. These are the men who created the first atomic bomb. I think they're pretty significant figures in U.S. history, to say the least. So a little bit more about the Manhattan Project. Many of the people working on it, I said Roosevelt wanted to get back together the best minds in America. Actually, many of the people working on it were German refugees. What if they had not left Germany? What do you think they could have been used for back in Germany?
They would have used spies.
That's right. If they hadn't left Germany, Hitler probably would have made them use their brains to work on his behalf. But because they were able to escape Germany, and every one of them has a different story, whether they were run out as immigrants or it was a Jewish issue or whatever the case is, they left Germany. And because they came to the United States, we, the United States, got to use their talents and use their intelligence to help create the atomic bombs. None of this just happened overnight. It was a series of testing, and the very first testing was actually called Trinity. This is a picture of Trinity. I'm going to go to this picture right here. What stands out to you about this bomb right here? It literally is taped together, Christy, right? She says it looks taped together. It literally is taped together. I've read a whole lot about the Trinity project. There's a variety of stories, but it was so imprecise with how it was built. Like, no, they definitely weren't using the assembly line, or they weren't putting it together like Henry Ford's cars. There's stories of certain scientists being responsible for a certain portion of the bomb. There's this one guy in particular where one night, like, he's asleep at home in bed. Obviously, he's probably stressed out because he's got a really important job, and he snaps awake in a cold sweat. And he realizes that he had crossed 2 wires the incorrect direction. So he races off to the experiment site, and he flips those 2 wires, red to green, green to red, whatever the case was. And because of that, if he hadn't caught that mistake, the bomb might not have worked. And the bomb, it might have malfunctioned overall. So the point is, it was a very imprecise technology. There were a lot of people just puzzle piecing together the ideas that they were having. And yes, it is literally taped together. This does not look like it'd be launched from a rocket. It does not look like it'd be dropped from an airplane. It doesn't have aerodynamic fins or anything like that. But this is the very first test bomb in atomic history, and it is nicknamed Trinity. This is actually the tower that it was dropped from. So obviously the tower would have been destroyed when it was tested, but this is the tower it was dropped from. It would have been put right up there. And I think if I go back one, yeah, I think this is the Trinity test right there. What stands out to you about those guys right there? Yeah, they're probably not far enough away. They don't have protection, and they're literally just kind of standing there watching it happen. I think it goes to show how little we knew about the technology. We did not have a great understanding of how radiation would extend farther out. We did not have an understanding of how far out the bomb could cause destruction. So very interesting pictures that come from the early test phase of the Manhattan Project.
We learned about some of this from Mr. Millar's class.
Oh yeah? From the science side.
Yeah.
That's right, Oppenheimer and Leon Szilard, right? Szilard?
I do drop part of the bomb with his foot.
Slizzer.
Slizzer. Yeah, who was your dude?
Slizzer.
Slizzer.
It was my dude.
Yeah, what was the name of my dude?
It was like slow something like that.
Okay.
Demon Core, yeah.
Yeah,
I
you
love the
my
crossover.
roommate.
Absolutely, and I've seen his posters out there. I know you guys do talk about this a little bit.
Leo Slizzer.
So yeah,
Water.
Leo Slizzer. Love this picture here. It's a really good representation of how this happened. 1939, as the world's on the brink of war, Albert Einstein sends a letter to FDR. Oh yeah, by the way, Germany invades Poland as well. So FDR can see the need for this technology. 1941, now he doesn't authorize it right away. In 1941, it is before Pearl Harbor, he authorizes the exploration of atomic energy. He says, let's put together this Manhattan Project and let's try to start figuring out atomic energy. 1942, Robert Oppenheimer, is he one of your guys?
Yeah.
Class class?
Yeah.
Robert Oppenheimer is the leader of the Manhattan Project. He's a very interesting case study all unto himself. Not the greatest of human beings, not a great moral character, kind of a drunkard, a womanizer, whatever. But sometimes it's these bad characters in history that are geniuses and come up with ways to save the world. And then in 1945, FDR dies before the first ever atomic test, which means that, check this out, Harry S. Truman, the Vice President of the United States, did not even know about the Manhattan Project. He did not know about atomic technology. So imagine this. The president dies, right? He kind of died of disease. He died of a long illness. Mr. Vice President, please take the oath. Swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. You are now the president. Excuse me, sir. We need to give you a briefing in the secret room back here. Hey, by the way, we have this technology called atomic bombs, and now you have to decide if you want to use one to end the war. President Harry Truman did not know about the bombs until the second he became president. That's pretty crazy to me, right? It was so secret at the top that even the vice president didn't know about it. But of course, he becomes the man who decides whether to use it in warfare or not. which gets me to these two Japanese cities named Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These are the only two cities in the history of the planet that have had a bomb dropped on them in wartime conditions. Now, there's been test sites all over the world, and the desert in Nevada remains a test site to this day. Okay, so we've dropped atomic bombs in testing, but these are the only two cities that have had a bomb dropped on them in their city center with civilians and military around, and people died from it in war. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The first bomb is dropped on August 6th. The hope is that that'll be enough to get the Japanese to surrender. If you remember anything from last year, or you're just catching the vibe here, you can see that it was not enough to get the Japanese to surrender. Drop a second bomb on August 9th on the city of Nagasaki. Following the second atomic bomb dropped, the Japanese do surrender shortly thereafter, August 12th. So kind of a 3-day turnaround of, okay, we surrender. And so it can be said that the atomic bombs ended World War II in the Pacific. Now, what's crazy about all of this is what if we needed to use a third? What do you think would have happened?
We don't have three.
Say it again?
We don't have
We
three.
didn't have three. We literally only had 2 atomic bombs assembled in the whole arsenal. So if the Japanese had bluffed, or if they had just held on, we literally didn't have a third to drop. So some people think that if they didn't surrender right then, and we had to show that we didn't have a third, or obviously just we would be like, oh, we don't have a third, that it kind of would have showed a weakness in the program. So it's fortuitous that they surrendered after the second bomb being dropped. This is real photography. Left-hand side Hiroshima, right-hand side Nagasaki, obviously taken from the airplanes that were part of the bombing raid on that day. These are the 2 actual bombs. Left-hand side Hiroshima, right-hand side Nagasaki. If you were to name a bomb, what would you name this guy? This is named Little Boy, thanks. And if you were to name a bomb, what would you name this guy? Yeah, it's a fat man. And you can kind of see the characteristics of each. So I love this infographic, right? You can see something about the bombs is that they were not armed on the ground. They were so unstable, just like, let's be honest, we were unsure about the technology, that they weren't armed on the ground. They got into the plane, and then there was someone inside the plane who was trained on how to arm it. And I suppose if something went wrong in the plane and it would have blown up above the sky, that'd be a different part of history. But, of course, as the story goes, it was armed successfully, and then it was dropped. I think something really cool is that the makers of the bombs wrote kind of some messages to the Japanese on their bombs. And, guys today still do that as well. They'll write, hey, to the Taliban, coming at you. And, it's just kind of something you write it on the bomb, and you know that bomb's going to get sent towards the enemy. It's just kind of a motivational thing. Well, what these guys wrote, greetings to the emperor from the men of the Indianapolis. There's a little side story I'm going to tell you. This is not something we shared last year. The uranium for this bomb right here, for Fat Man, was delivered aboard a ship called the USS Indianapolis. The USS Indianapolis delivers the uranium to a particular island in Japan. On this island in Japan, they are going to they're going to create the bomb and have it ready to be armed, put it on the airplane, all that kind of stuff. Well, USS Indianapolis, it leaves that island and it's dispatched back to Pearl Harbor. Okay, that's a pretty normal route to be taking. Along the way, leaving that first island, going to Pearl Harbor, it is torpedoed and sunk by a Japanese submarine. Unfortunately, it's kind of weird for us to think about today because we got so much technology. Unfortunately, they were not able to get out a radio call. They didn't have a homing beacon. They definitely didn't have anything GPS like that. When it sunk, nobody knew about it for like 3 days. They weren't tracking the ship movement accurately. That's kind of part of the problem, is that nobody realized it was sunk, or it hadn't reported when it should have reported. Well, 3 days later, finally, someone at Pearl Harbor is like, hey, I think the USS Indianapolis is supposed to be here, but it isn't yet. At that time, they sent out rescue planes along the route that the Indianapolis was supposed to be at, and they started to see this oil slick coming from far off in the ocean. They followed the oil slick, and what they found was the men of the USS Indianapolis spread out for miles. The ship had sunk to the bottom of the ocean. These men are on life rafts. There's obviously the currents of the ocean. They're spread out for miles. Many of them had died. Many of them died initially in the strike. Many of them died of dehydration in the days following. Many of them died because they were in shark-infested waters. And literally, in their swimming, they're wading, they're holding onto their life jackets. The stories of survivors are that their buddy, who's right next to them, would all of a sudden disappear below the surface. Grabbed by a shark, taken to the underneath, literally eaten by the sharks. They were in shark infested. So if the torpedo wasn't enough, and the dehydration wasn't enough, they were also in shark infested waters. USS Indianapolis is a fascinating story. It is a movie starring Nicolas Cage. I'll say the movie is eh. There's a book that's been written about it that is yes. Okay, so movie, and I think it could do a little bit better job telling the story. The book is fantastic. It really is. If you got more interest or curiosity, I'd be happy to loan you the book or just tell you more about the story. It's a phenomenal story of heroism at the very end of World War II. Some of the guys who helped deliver this uranium never knew that they were successful. They never knew that their bomb is what ended the war in the Pacific. The Indianapolis is actually the last ship, the last American ship to have been sunk in World War II. So these guys, it's like they made it so close to the finish line. Their ship got sunk. They perished. They died. They didn't really, they didn't get to live in a war-free world after that. So totally interesting extra side story. I do think it's appropriate that on this bomb it said, "Greetings from the men of the Indianapolis." It's like, coming at you. Coming at you. Question.
What happens to the uranium?
So it got put into the bomb. It effectively it was not on the ship. It was when they were being dispatched back to Pearl Harbor for their next mission or whatever that it happened. Yeah, good question. The uranium wasn't on the ship. All right, so that leads me to, we're going to take our bathroom break real quick. When we come back, we're going to watch 22 minutes of this. It's on Netflix, okay? It's a little bit older photography, so get your drones out. This is I've already shortened it. We're not watching the whole episode. It's a great conclusion to the war in the Pacific. You're actually going to see the pilots who dropped the bombs, and I want you to consider your opening question. Did they break the law? Are they mass murderers because they were following orders? Something to think about. I want you to see the destruction that these bombs brought onto these two cities. And I want you to think about the military relevance to dropping these bombs. Were we justified to drop these bombs from a military perspective? Or was it on a civilian city? And should we not have dropped the bombs on these cities based off of the destruction that it brought? So some big questions to think about. Just a 22-minute quick watch when we get back. Let's go ahead and go to the bathroom. Short way.
Savannah.
Again,
Hi, Savannah. Hi, Savannah. Hi, Savannah. Hi, Savannah. Hi,
Hey, Jake.
Savannah. Hi, Savannah. Hi, Savannah. Hi, Savannah.
It is Monday. Come off of an epic vacation, trip of a lifetime.
And on both sides get destroyed.
Yeah, you give your fries would be soggy.
There ain't no fries.
You ate them?
No. Someone got me a singular cheeseburger.
Why you got on a lollipop?
Say, I'm really hungry, Mr. Stark.
Lollipop. Lollipop. Lollipop.
What's this? What's this? Can I get one of this? I mean, it's.
Did you do the thing last time?
Oh, no, that's one.
Oh, can I get one of them?
If women allocate.
Dude, no, I'm about to kill my dude.
So you need to leave.
It's
Seven.
I'm from the beginning, I'm going through a hard time.
That is insane.
My surgery. My surgery. I'm gonna sit there and watch y'all. I'm gonna wear a bathing suit.
Harley said she's wearing a bathing suit.
I'm gonna call him. I'm good.
You will have, I need to see mine.
You're done.
Yeah, the
This is regions, not no other match.
So you can drive.
All right, before we get started, I want to give out prizes to those of you who responded pineapple on my Google Classroom post last night. I made a really important post, and I'm going to go over our schedule at the end of this class. I hope I got enough time. But if you read it last night and you read it to the end, it said comment pineapple below, and I got something for you tomorrow. So here's what I got for you. Savannah, heads up. Gage, I'm sorry, missiles coming in, nuclear bombs, Madison. I got weird. Macy and Landon. Boom. All right. Now I got to take attendance since I realized Macy's not here. All right, hey, sit down, shut up, watch my show.
Whoa, now.
Come on. That would have been so dramatic.
Fall out.
The Burns, and the Truman administration, the offer was on
How about down underneath arm?
To control future China, once influence
What else do you think?
to keep Japan under his thumb, once influence in terms of his relationship with the United States.
For Truman now, the question is, invade without Soviet help and risk huge casualties, or enlist Russian help and risk communism spreading through the Pacific.
Now the Americans have buyer's remorse. Truman has no doubt that once the Soviets get across into Manchuria, they're going to take Japan itself. They will divide Japan the same way Germany is going to be divided into a communist east and a capitalist west.
With the future world order at stake, Truman heads to Germany to meet with Stalin and Churchill. Leading New Mexico's Manhattan Project engineers are on the verge of opening a new and even darker prospect. Their quest to unlock the vast energies trapped within atomic nuclei is complete. On July the 16th, they test the world's first atomic bomb. The blast creates a 7-mile-high mushroom cloud. In a few seconds, the terrifying elemental forces of the atom are unleashed on the world. And President Truman sees a way to avoid the invasion. The pressure to deploy the bomb is immense.
He's terrified that if he doesn't use the bomb, then the Americans have to invade Kyushu and suffer casualties. And the American people find out he had this bomb and didn't use it, then he will be crucified.
The majority of those around Truman urge he deploy it.
The pro-bomb people say, look, this is a weapon like any other. I mean, we've created a new weapon. Let's use it to end the war.
The ethics of this destructive weapon are not a priority to Truman.
Using an atomic bomb was not going to cross any moral lines that hadn't already been crossed. The attack on Tokyo in March had killed so many people that nothing the atomic bomb could do was going to change the nature of the bombing campaign. Rather than having tens of thousands of bombs dropped on the city, this was going to be one bomb.
Of the president's team, only Lee is vehemently against using the bomb.
His opposition is on every level, but the ethics and the morality of it are the driving force. This is a bomb that can destroy something that is new and radioactive and could kill for God knows how many years afterwards.
But for Burns, the bomb deals with two problems at once.
It's a way to warn off the Soviets. They say, look, we can threaten the Japanese with this weapon, but if you try to get involved in further expansion in the Far East, we can threaten you with it as well.
Just hours after the test, the Navy loads the components for the first of two bombs onto the USS Indianapolis. The destination, Tinian, a tiny island in the Pacific where air crews are ready. Truman authorizes the Air Force to use the bomb where and when it sees fit. But some of the project scientists express grave doubts. Led by physicist Leo Szilard, 70 scientists signed a petition against the use of a nuclear weapon.
They say, look, we have this weapon. It's a trump card. We now have this massive deterrent. It would be utterly inhumane to actually deploy this against human beings.
Szilard takes the petition to Burns, but he never passes it on to the president. On the 26th of July, the Allies give Japan an ultimatum. At Potsdam, they demand the unconditional surrender of Japan's armed forces.
The British, Chinese, and United States governments have given the Japanese people adequate warning of what is in store for them.
The statement deliberately makes no mention of the emperor. By hinting that the emperor can stay, the Allies leave the Japanese with a face-saving path to surrender.
They could have said it more clearly. It's certainly not clear enough statement for the Japanese to automatically know they could keep the emperor.
For military hardliners, surrender under any circumstances is not an option. The Allies go on to demand an occupation of Japan and for disarmament of their forces. Even for the peace-seeking faction, the terms are too much.
The Prime Minister makes a statement that they will ignore or treat with contempt the Potsdam Declaration.
The statement all but seals the fate of millions of Japanese. The empire has run out of time. In the early hours of August the 6th, 3 B-29s head towards Japan. On board the Enola Gay is the bomb Little Boy, containing 141 pounds of enriched uranium. The target, Hiroshima, a city of 350,000 people. At 8:15 a.m. during the morning rush hour, the atomic bomb is dropped.
The bomb was finally released exactly at the designated hour, and the explosion occurred as planned.
So that guy, I stopped it just a little late. That guy was the weaponeer.
Teacher Swanson?
Yes, ma'am.
Swanson?
Yep. They're all coming to you. Every last one of them. Anybody think they're getting checked out? Cool, good story. So that guy, I stopped it just a little late. He's the weaponeer. He was not the pilot. Yes, ma'am. On the way. Chandler for checkout. The weaponeer. What did you notice about his little interview there? How did he seem?
Shook up. So
Like, didn't seem like he felt bad. Anyone else?
He was not for it.
You think he was not for it? Anna Kate, what are you saying? Nothing I can do about it now? Okay. Landon, I kind of like your thought. He was not for it, but as a military man, I don't know that, but as a military man, what was his obligation?
Follow orders.
Do as told. Follow orders. That's right. I think that's a very if you start to judge his body language, the way his eyes are shifting, he actually kind of looks to the side a couple times. Those are indicators that someone is uncomfortable with the statements they're making. I don't know the man. I haven't read more about him, but I see in that quick little statement there, I see a guy that probably wasn't super in favor of what he had just done. Recognize the gravity, and even the words he used, they're very plain. They're very military words. So I'm going to try to fast forward or rewind to just those 10 seconds and watch his statement one more time because it's pretty powerful.
Russia, the atomic bomb is dropped.
The bomb was finally released exactly at the designated hour, and the explosion occurred as planned.
It explodes 1,900 feet above the Shima Hospital. A burst of neutron and gamma radiation emanates out, along with deadly shock waves.
At 8:14, it was a sunny day. At 8:15, it was a hellscape.
What happens on the 6th of August is absolutely shocking.
People and life were vaporized, incinerated. Many died from massive doses of gamma radiation.
In less than a second, 70,000 people are killed.
The super hurricane force wind flattened buildings in instants.
A giant mushroom of smoke rises from the 5,500 degree firestorm.
Nothing in the human experience had prepared anybody for such totalizing damage so instantaneously.
One of the eeriest effects of the atomic bomb was that the shadows of individuals who had been vaporized were preserved on concrete or stone where they had been standing.
Beyond ground zero, the human devastation is unprecedented. 13-year-old Setsuko is in her first class of the day.
I saw the bluish white flash. I had the sensation of flying up in the air. I woke up in the total darkness and silence, and I started hearing faint voices They were saying, God help me, Mother help me.
Those caught outside in the blast suffer hideous burns.
They were begging for water. Water, please, please give me water. Flesh and skin were hanging from their bones.
Skin from the upper torso, hanging like a shirt from the waist down.
They didn't look like human beings at all.
Setsuko is relatively unscathed. Her sister Ayako is not so lucky.
My sister and her child were burned, blood from their swollen, just a chunk of flesh melted, just unrecognizable.
By the end of the day, thousands more died from radiation injuries.
And when the darkness fell, we just sat on the hill and watched all night the entire city burn.
Setsuko loses 351 of her school friends and 8 members of her family. The Japanese are in disarray. They have no idea what has hit them.
They knew that it was some really, really powerful bomb, but they did not know what it was.
Returning from Europe on board the USS Augusta, Truman receives word of the explosion.
When Truman announces that the atom bomb has been dropped, then everyone cheers. There's one person not cheering, and that's his chief of staff, William Leahy. He believes the United States has done something that was ethically wrong, it didn't have to do, and that would have been far better for the world and for U.S. security not to do.
16 hours later, President Truman announces to the world that the US has dropped a nuclear weapon on Japan. The threat is that this was simply one of many.
If they do not now accept our terms, they may expect a rain of glory from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth.
Foreign Minister Togo urges the leadership to assemble and consider calling an end to the war. But the military diehards refuse to even meet.
Most of them said this is just another bombing. It's just like any other bombing. They weren't aware this was a special kind of weapon. And they kind of poo-pooed it and said, well, you know, this is not worth surrendering over. We've absorbed much worse bombings in Tokyo with conventional weaponry.
But in the Soviet Union, Stalin looks on with alarm. He brings forward his declaration of war on Japan.
When the atomic bomb went in, all of his dreams of Soviet influence were subject to possible disintegration. Having just one dropped was enough to cause him to move that tactic.
The Soviets want to get into it because they want to play a role in the Pacific peace. If the war ends in July 1945, the Soviets are not a combatant. They have no say or seat on the peace table.
On August the 9th, just before 1 a.m., the Soviets invade Japanese-held Manchuria. 1.5 million troops simultaneously attack on 3 separate fronts.
They caught the Japanese flat-foot. The Soviet attack accomplishes enough to paralyze the command and control of the Japanese. They very simply outclassed the Quantum Army.
When news reaches Tokyo that the flagship of the Japanese Imperial Army has been overrun, Prime Minister Suzuki calls an emergency meeting of the Supreme War Council. But the situation is about to escalate yet again.
4 minutes into the meeting, notice was brought in that a second bomb has been dropped on Nagasaki.
At 11:01 a.m., the United States had deployed the plutonium bomb Fat Man on the city.
Within a flash of a light, 70,000 people dead and dying. The ground zero of that target was the Urukambi Cathedral, the largest Roman Catholic cathedral in all of Asia at that time. Complete and utter devastation.
Almost 10,000 Catholics perish, alongside the Japanese, Koreans, Chinese. Even Allied POWs are killed. The Nagasaki bomb is far more powerful than the one used on Hiroshima. The population suffered gamma radiation levels 17 times the lethal dose.
individuals who looked like they had virtually no injury at all would suddenly develop symptoms like bleeding from the mouth, nostrils, and the rectum, and then they would abruptly die.
The War Council debate the situation for 13 hours.
For the Japanese, the predicament has become infernal. They're under attack from the Americans who have unlimited conventional capability. And now you have 1.5 million Red Army troops marching through Manchuria and prepared to cross to the Japanese islands.
But even now, the Council is divided. 3 favor peace and are willing to accept the Potsdam Declaration. 3 refuse.
There were factions within the military, particularly in the army, that believed that the surrender was just out of the questions. They would fight till the end.
With the leadership at stalemate and fearing the government will be brought to its knees, Prime Minister Suzuki makes an extraordinary move.
Not long before midnight on August 9th, the Emperor gets word that he needs to appear because they're deadlocked.
It comes down to the Emperor to make a stand.
Hirohito, until now insulated from the war, finds himself the fate of the Japanese people in his hands.
With no Kwantung Army, there's going to be one battle left, and that's going to be in Japan. It's going to be against Russians. It's going to be against Americans. And oh, by the way, a lot of Chinese hate us too. So it's going to cost the Japanese a large chunk of their population.
Hirohito makes a momentous decision. At midday on August the 15th, the Emperor himself addresses the public on national radio.
It was the first time people had heard the Emperor speak, and so his voice was called the Gyokuon, or the jeweled sound.
He tells the nation that the attack is so horrific they cannot continue the war. It is time for Japan to surrender.
People just stood there in a stunned way, stunned. There was a sense of relief, the end of war. That means peace.
But after decades of being told Japan is invincible, the humiliation is unbearable.
Many Japanese feel sorry for the Emperor. They feel as though they've let the Emperor down.
I did see several soldiers just throwing themselves onto the ground, just sobbing, and that was unthinkable announcement.
As expected, factions of the military refused to obey.
He was immediately informed that 2 of the 3 overseas commanders initially announced they would not comply with the surrender order, even from the Emperor.
In a bid to avoid insurrection, Hirohito delivers a second message to the armed forces, this time stressing the entry of the Soviets into the war against them.
The Emperor cites Soviet intervention as a factor, on the belief that that is going to be far more persuasive to those commanders than atomic bombs.
Just weeks after the atomic attacks and the Soviet invasion, all the armed forces are persuaded to lay down their arms.
Which was the brutal, costly eastern half of the most horrible worldwide war in human history, is now within minutes of ending for good.
On the 2nd of September, General MacArthur accepts the official surrender and begins a 6-year Allied occupation of Japan. The Americans formed the Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission to assess the effects of the explosions. Staffed by some 1,000 US and Japanese medics, the commission's work draws serious criticism.
The broken, surviving people were marched in front of doctors to be examined, to be inspected like rats in a lab. Their scarring was measured, their injuries were noted. They were not treated in any way, shape, or form. That's a level of inhumanity that is almost indescribable.
You can imagine how we felt. We were used as a guinea pig twice. First as a target, second as an object of medical research.
But the nightmare is far from over. Victims are often shunned for fear of contagion, and the steady passage of time reveals the insidious nature of radiation to long-term effects. Birth deformities, cardiovascular diseases, and deadly cancers.
The violence that was initiated on August 6th and August 9th in 1945 continues to this day. Using nuclear weapons is really like waging war on the future.
Chillingly, the world is not to know what the victims suffer. The US suppresses virtually all film and images from Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japanese newsreel is confiscated and American military footage classified.
The images that were distributed were the sort of grainy films that primarily showed the destructiveness of the blast. They did not show bodies of burned children and women and the absolute carnage that was caused.
It was not until 1970 that footage showing the human suffering is broadcast on US television.
By the river, people lay bleeding from their faces or hands and died without weeping. People trapped under fallen houses called patiently, meekly, help, if I may ask.
The public finally learns the true extent of the effects of deadly radiation. Serious questions are now asked about the decision to drop the bombs.
There is a sense in Japan that the second bomb was the unnecessary bomb. This is no longer a science project. This is something that has caused devastation and destruction in ways that have never experienced by humans throughout their entire history. How can that possibly happen?
The atomic bombs close a chapter of the deadliest conflict in history. Germany and Japan's aggression left almost no corner of the globe untouched, but their defeat came at a huge human cost. The consequences reverberate to this day. Across East Asia, there is still great bitterness towards Japan for its violent expansionism. 25 million people died in the Pacific War.
Every day the war continued in 1945. At least 10,000 other Asians were dying in China, Vietnam, and was now Indonesia. About 90% of them were non-combatants. 10,000 every single day.
But in the aftermath of the war, it becomes expedient to downplay the barbarities and reframe Japan in a fresh light. The world faces new threats, Stalin and the rise of communism. To maintain stability and American authority, the US retains Emperor Hirohito.
Japan changes from being seen as an enemy that needs to be transformed to actually a very important bulwark against communism, sort of a large American military base.
Japan becomes the Pacific outpost of American democracy. But in 1949, the Soviets test their first atomic weapon. Today, there are over 15,000 nuclear weapons on the planet.
We've lived for decades under the shadow of possible nuclear annihilation. And those weapons that were available in 1945 were veritable firecrackers compared to the weapons that are available today.
With global tensions mounting, the threat of nuclear war is rising once again.
All right. This is a series called World War II in Color. Can be found on Netflix if any of you have curiosity to check it out more. I know it doesn't have any like bumping CGI graphics like the Avengers or whatever, but it's a really good documentary series. Really outlines World War II if you have that interest. I believe that was a very fair and balanced 20-minute clip about the atomic question. It showed the military necessity. It certainly showed the human toll, the human cost on it. So probably a lot of things to consider that came out of that short clip right there. I want you to take it back to that very first question at the top of your page and ask yourself again, can you break the law if you are just following orders? Or alter the question slightly, do you think that the pilot of the Enola Gay, which was the first airplane to ever drop an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, do you think that he's a mass murderer? Here's his picture. His name is Paul Tibbets. The Enola Gay airplane was named after his mother. His mother's name was Enola Gay. He named his airplane after his mother. When he dropped that bomb on Hiroshima, and almost instantly, 80,000 plus people died instantly, not to mention the longer radiation effects, and maybe even literally to this day still affecting the area. Do you think that Paul Tibbets is a mass murderer? What do you think? Criminal? Breaking the law? Just following orders? Let's parallel that with the Nazi guards, and especially those at the concentration camps, who very often said that they were, this exact phrase, just following orders. When guards at the concentration camps, low-level guards, right, not the camp commanders, but low-level guards who very often were responsible for the executions, a lot of them said that they were just following orders. It wasn't my fault. I didn't do it. I was just following orders, right? I got my hands up in this posture like I'm just following orders. It's not my fault. It's kind of a big question to consider. It's at the top of your page. I'll look forward to reading your responses. Is it wrong to just follow orders? Can you break the law? Is Paul Tibbets Jr. a mass murderer because he dropped the bomb on Hiroshima? Big question. Y'all aren't quite as talkative as I thought you might be, so go ahead and write your answer, and I'll be happy to read it when you turn your page in. Of note, Paul Tibbets Jr., he is buried in an unmarked grave at an unknown location for fear that his grave might be desecrated by people who are against atomic bombs. So he was just a pilot, just following orders in an airplane named after his mother. But he kind of can't really rest in peace for fear that some people might desecrate his grave based off of a protest of nuclear energy. Anyway, that's a side story. A little bit of just the timeline here to kind of round it out for us. Here's the summary of the summer of 1945. It was a really busy summer. July 26th, the Potsdam Declaration is given to Japan. It is a document that outlines the terms of surrender. In the end, Japan will accept these terms of surrender, but not before 2 bombs are dropped on their cities, right? So they really could have had it out on July 26th, but they didn't take it. The video did a really good job of describing their national attitude, opposed to surrender. It would be shameful. There's some politics in there that aren't really normal to us. We don't have an emperor, but the emperor in Japan was seen as almost like a godlike figure, a deity. So when he spoke about surrender, that's what finally convinced the nation to surrender. So that's July 26th, establishes the terms of surrender. August 6th, Hiroshima. August 9th, Nagasaki. August 14th, Japan finally accepts the terms of Potsdam, which if they had done so 18 days earlier, the 2 bombs would have been dropped in the first place. September 2nd is the official surrender of Japan to the Allied nations aboard the USS Missouri. You saw some video there real quick, and then you see some pictures right there as well. Basically, it was a ceremony on board this battleship, the Mighty Mo, the USS Missouri. Today, the USS Missouri is a decommissioned battleship, and it's a floating museum in Pearl Harbor. It was not at Pearl Harbor, but today, as a tourist attraction, it's located at Pearl Harbor. I got to visit in 2008. A pretty cool thing. You can actually see what life on a Navy ship is like. The USS Missouri was active all the way through 1993. It actually fought in the Gulf War in 1991. So first shots fired in World War II, last shots fired in the Desert Storm Gulf War in 1991. That's a pretty long lifespan for a ship. This leads to VJ Day. Actually, let me finish this real quick. This is actually the instrument of surrender that they signed. There was those photographs of the people sitting at the table, General MacArthur representing the Allied forces, the Japanese diplomats with their suit and tie and top hat. This is actually what they signed. Obviously, it's a replica. It comes from the Pearl Harbor Museum. And these are the signatures of the various nations. So we have the Japanese signatures at the top, and then we also have representatives United States, China, United Kingdom, Soviet, Australia, Canada, France, Netherlands, and New Zealand. So this was these are the Allied nations receiving the surrender. This is the Japanese giving the surrender. So pretty cool little replica there if you care to see it. This all leads to so-called VJ Day, which is recognized as August 14th and this is what newspapers said on that day. Peace. Do you think that VJ Day really brought peace to the world?
No.
No, why not?
Because not everyone's like just
Fun, it is
like
fun.
bittersweet, like it's not happiness. it's
Bittersweet, not happiness, Christian what?
like-
Made us like monsters, how so?
Around the world.
Yeah, because now there's nuclear weapons in the world. So peace in Japan, maybe. Peace in the Pacific Theater, yeah. But peace around the world, I like what Christian said. I think we just opened the door to the nuclear bomb question, and that is a question that still exists in the world to this day. Well, this is what the world looked like on VJ Day, August 14th, 1945. Peace, I just showed you. VJ Day is where this iconic photo comes from. This is a sailor in Times Square. Here it is colorized. And he is, as the story goes, he does not know this young lady, right? He just grabbed a woman in the streets and kissed her, which is kind of a different conversation in the world today. But at the time, it was a representation of the joy felt throughout the world on that day. So I believe a lot of you have seen this photograph. This comes from VJ Day. Here we go. My picture may be slightly out of order. Here's the moment of surrender. Hey, don't check out on me. I still got a lot of time. I still got some things to do. This is the moment of surrender. So you can see it's just on board the battleship, but they have the table set up. There's a lot of pictures of sailors kind of clamoring to get a view of history. And then this is the actual instrument of surrender that they signed. Leads me to the atomic legacy. Kind of opened the door. Christian said it pretty well already. Because we now have a nuclear bomb, we are seen as a world superpower. But the documentary said it pretty well, and you guys can probably already start to think about it. Who wanted to compete with us as a superpower? Soviet Union. This is going to lead to, we aren't quite there yet, but yeah, we're going to talk about what is the Cold War. I like to say if it's cold, then it should just put on a jacket. Now, that's a different thing. Yeah, it's going to lead to a Cold War. Here's a really powerful quote. We did see this last year. Let me show it to you again. In this time period, Albert Einstein said this: "I know not what weapons World War III will be fought with, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones." What does he mean by that?
We'll bomb it. Because we're going to bomb everything. We're not going to have anything left.
Well, that's a great way to put it. World War III is going to be fought with the types of weapons that erase civilizations, which means World War IV, I think he's being a little sarcastic, but should there ever be a World War IV, all we're ever going to have left is sticks and stones. The idea is we need to avoid a World War III as a human race. Right? And we're going to come to the brink of it several times. USA versus USSR. And come to the brink and back off of it. Come to the brink. Are we going to war? And back off of it. We'll talk about that inside of the Cold War. So you do have one more space on your notes if you haven't filled it out already. Leads me to the big question. Why did the U.S. use the atomic bombs on Japan?
To show power.
History kind of gives us three good options. What are they? Since I know you've already seen them. One idea would be, hey, those jokers bombed us first. Well, let's finish the job and drop a nuke on them. They started it at Pearl. Let's finish it now. Revenge for Pearl Harbor. That's one idea. What's another idea? To threaten Russia. Well, wait a second. Aren't they our friends? Didn't we just have that picture with the lieutenants shaking hands and hugging each other and stuff? But it lasted for about 3.5 minutes. So isn't it funny that even though we're friends right now, the idea is that we use the bomb to show off. Hey, Joseph Stalin, check this out. Guess what's in my back pocket? I can drop this bomb whenever I want to. All right, that's idea number 2. And while I will hear arguments for that, history really recognizes that the reason the bombs were dropped was to end the war without an invasion of mainland Japan. If you want to go through the statistics of how many lives could have been lost in an invasion of mainland Japan, generally speaking, hard to know because it didn't happen, but it is likely that more people would have died with another D-Day style invasion, right? Storming the beaches of mainland Japan. People on the American and Allied side and on the Japanese side, it is likely that more people would have died in a prolonged invasion and attack on Japan than in dropping these 2 nuclear bombs. Now, the other side of that conversation is that, but you dropped the bomb in a generally civilian location. You can't really say it was a military target. What were the two epicenters of the bombs?
One was a hospital, one was a church.
Yeah, the epicenters for these two bombs. One was over a hospital, one was over a Roman Catholic church, right? It's not even like an Asian religion, right? That is literally a worldwide religion, Roman Catholic Church. The number of military deaths in the two atomic bombs, very, very, very little, right? I can show you the numbers here in a second, but very, very, very little. So it's really hard to say that we're attacking a military target. That said, President Truman, his advisors, and many others kind of point to the fact that the reason we used the bombs was to end the war quick, to avoid a mainland invasion of Japan. And while it was devastating to the Japanese for generations to come, maybe we can think about how many American lives were saved, how many young men became grandparents. Quite frankly, how many of you might be alive today because your grandparents or great-grandparents didn't have to go storm the beaches of Tokyo, right? Hang with me, I still got 10 minutes. So that said, that's kind of the big answer right there. Those of you that love The Office, here's a bit of a joke right here. Japan says, that's not funny, you didn't nuke Germany. And the United States says, okay, well, you're the one that messed with my boat. Little Jim and Dwight joke right there. Here is, now we have seen this picture before, so I'm going to go a little bit faster. Here is the depth of the destruction that happened. Hiroshima, estimated deaths, 120,000. Nagasaki, estimated deaths, 80,000. Even though it was a more powerful bomb, it did tend to kill fewer people. Now, what's not measured on this particular statistic is deaths in the months and even years afterwards. Okay, we know that the radiation, the science of radiation, killed people for a long time afterwards. Here's another really good representation of what would happen if I was 1 mile away, 5 miles away, 10 miles away. That radiation extends, so the red zone would be considered the dead zone. Basically kind of a 4 mile distance for these bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There are more powerful bombs in the world today. But literally the effects would be felt via the shock waves all the way to 25 miles out. So this is the type of weapon we were dealing with. Here is the before and after on, I believe, Hiroshima. I should have this in my notes. I believe this was the first bomb drop. So I do find it interesting. How come that one building in the middle of the picture survived? Or the building in the forefront. How did that building survive, whereas others didn't? I don't have the answers on why the winds, the hurricane force winds went one direction, not the other.
There was like advertisements that were like, our building survived, not disaster.
Yeah, I do. I think that concrete company probably made a lot of money afterwards.
Yeah.
Here's the cool part of the story. Is the rebuilding, right? Hey. The dole roar. Stop. Let me finish. Here's a cool part of the story is the rebuilding. Yeah, that's the destruction in 1945. But what do you know Japan has today? What is Japan known for? Their beauty, tech country, a tourist destination, culture, music, art comes out of Japan.
No, it is.
Japan has rebuilt itself today in a big way. So very interesting to think about how it was literally flattened and under Allied control at the end of World War II. But the Japan that you know today is not that same empire of Japan. That's why we don't say that Japan is our enemy today. Japan's a friend. That's why we don't use that phrase JAP, because that is a derogatory term to people of Japan in the world today. Japan was once an enemy. The empire of Japan was. But Japan of today is not. Here's what the nuclear world looks like today. This is pretty accurate. These numbers come from January of 2020. Russia has about 500 more warheads than we do. We are clearly the two top countries in the world with nuclear warheads. Gets down to North Korea, and that's kind of a guess because we don't exactly have open sources in North Korea. But these are the only nuclear countries in the world. Here they are on a map. These are the countries in the world that have nuclear bombs. Not every country does. If you have nuclear bombs, the capability, you're called a nuclear power. And these countries right here are the nuclear powers in the world today. Now, Sanaa said something really interesting when we were on our bathroom break. She said that Mr. McGuire has inspired her to want to be a nuclear chemist, right? And Mr. Swanson's history class is probably contributing to that as well. Here is how nuclear bombs have advanced since these first two. Left-hand side of the screen, I'm about to show it. Left-hand side of the screen, you're going to see Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Right-hand side of the screen, you're going to see the biggest bomb ever dropped. I want you to note that. Gee, what's your question?
So you're telling me if we would take all 5,800 hours and drop them on Russia, they would all explode at the same time, so that's like wiping out a...
And the Earth would literally be knocked off of its axis. If we did what you just said, the Earth would literally be knocked out of orbit. Then who would be dead? All of us. Yeah. All right, check this out. Left-hand side. That is the size of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs. And the largest bomb ever tested in 1961 is a bomb tested by Russia. It's called the Tsar bomb. And you can see it is significantly larger than the two bombs that were ever actually dropped in warfare. Only bombs ever dropped in warfare, largest bomb ever produced. Okay? In a second, I'll take it. We've already said it. So this ushers us into the atomic age, which is characterized by a bunch of versus. Us versus, for starters, it's us versus them. But it's the East, that means USSR versus the West. It's the USA versus the USSR. A lot of people would say it's good versus bad. The thing is, does anybody ever think that they're the bad guy?
No.
Right, yeah. Does the USSR think that they're the bad guys? Yeah. No, they don't. They think that they're the good guys, right? So, and then kind of characterized as free versus oppressed.
Here we are.
All right.
We're the ones killing people. Okay,
Since this is the end of World War II, let me finish it out. I will finish, just so you know.
We're talking about
Here's the legacy of World War II. This is the National World War II Memorial. It's in Washington, D.C. It's very beautiful. It's characterized as the European theater on one side, the Pacific theater on the other. There's 50 state pillars there, so should you ever be in Washington, D.C., go take a picture with the Georgia one and send me that picture. I think I showed you this last week. This is 4,048 gold stars. Each one of them represents 100 dead Americans, soldiers. Not people that died, other reasons, but 100 dead American soldiers. This is the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. Should you ever find your way in New Orleans, you can see it's big. There's airplanes in there, so it's a really cool museum. And I got to go in 2016 or so with the Army, so it was like a field trip. And that is what I will offer to you as the opportunity that you have in the world today. We are done with World War II. The war has come to a close. What are we not done with yet? What are we not done with yet? School. Unit 4. Yeah, you're not done with Unit 4. When's your exam? Friday. You have an exam on Friday, right? Hey, Friday. Should you plan to miss Friday for some reason, you can take it on Thursday, right? Let me know to take it on Thursday. But here's where we're going the rest of the week. I got a tiny bit tomorrow, a little bit of a gap that I didn't hit inside of our unit, and then we're going to be reviewing. We're going to do a deliberate review. We're going to do the type of test-style questions that you guys like to review. We're also going to play spoons on Thursday. You good with that? We're going to play spoons on Thursday, so get ready for it. And that's where we're going. But the step after that is that we're going to paddle real hard. Boys, we're going to paddle real hard towards the EOC. I have to be gone for a whole 5 days. I got to go Army for 5 days. It's going to be difficult to stay connected during that time, but I'm going to do the video class thing. I think we'll be all right. It's real important that you want to try to stay engaged. For Unit 5 for starters, but then for the EOC review after that. I made a post to Google Classroom. She's coming. I made a post to Google Classroom. I'm not going to show it to you right now. Check it out. I've lined out day by day what we're doing. Okay, so every given day should not be a mystery to you. Come to class, know what we're doing, be ready for it. Got some demonstrations, got some immersions coming up. It's not just my voice. We got some fun stuff coming up. Be here for it. 4.5 weeks to the finish line. Can we do it?
Yes.
Can we do it?
Yes.
4.5 weeks to the finish line. Can we do it?
No.
Yes. I'm gonna let you go to lunch and you say yes.
Yes. Thank you, Jesus.
I think.
Yummy.
Just leave it out, leave Chromebooks out, next block will use it. Oh, okay.
I love Jack.
If you look at my class codes,
That was terrible. Happy
No.
Monday.
No, I need these strings. I just got new ones. Good chat. Thanks for your attention.
Wait,
make this
Even you.
Hold on. How do you do it?
I'm gonna make an end of semester.
How do you make the screensaver?
You just have to do it at some point.
Oh. Yeah, that's not it.
Wait, where is it?
Wait, no.
I can do
No,
the
you have to do it
Not
after.
yet.
No, you have to do it
Wait.
after. Hayden.
Hold on. All right, listen. So,
Do your little post. Just do your little post. I'll
um,
make it the screensaver.
this is the end of Monday. We won't be here tomorrow.
Tennis region tournament.
Wish us luck. Anyways, World War II is over, and we're the bad guys. So, corn's up.
Corn's up.
A-N is, oh.
Please just hit the red button. And then hit the next red button.